Okay, so I want to get these just on some new layers. I do like this new feature in Photoshop. That is, let's see, was it here? Click. Yeah, it's this object selection tool. And so got that picked, this working, and index color image. So first thing, image mode RGB, and now it changed it. It doesn't make much difference, so let me use this tool, and I like dragging around it because it does a pretty good job of figuring out what it needs to cut out. I need to add the little tail up there. Whoops. Try it again. So it's got the fish pretty good. A little left over, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. Shut that one up. This one now. I've got another one. I've got the layer set so that it shows what's in the layer at 100%. Sometimes I like that, sometimes I don't. You can turn it on and off. So the last fish here. So now I've got all three of my fishes cut out on a background layer. When I build nozzles, most of the time I will build them on a gray background, just so I can kind of see if I've got any bad edges that are showing up. And these don't look too bad. And what I will do is I'll select all of these, and I'm going to just arrange the layers a little bit, align them. So vertical centers, pretty close, and horizontal centers. So they're all pretty much aligned. I want to go ahead and group these, and I'm doing that just because I want to go ahead and make a lot of copies of all of the fish, and instead of copying individual layers, I want to kind of keep them in groups. So I'll start with this top layer here, and I'm going to ungroup it. So you can see my fish down there, correct? And I'm recording the right thing. So I'm going to hide each one of these. So I've only got 3 fish, but I'm going to make these look like a lot of fish. So Control T with this. There we come on, show up. And I'm going to rotate him around so he's vertical. I'm going to get all these fish so their heads are pretty vertical. So then when I make the nozzle, I can make them basically following around. So enter. And this is one of my favorite tools in here also. So I got a little bit of white there. I'm going to get rid of that, just using the magic wand tool. And for some reason I like doing this kind of work. I use the mouse, so I'm not using my stylus at all. I'm just doing it with a mouse. So backspace that off. And this is now one of my really favorite tools. Edit, Puppet Warp. And I don't know if you can see it, but it built a little triangular grid all the way across this thing. And wherever I click my mouse now, it puts a little pin down. You can see the little pin icon next to it. And I'm putting the pins right here on the head and kind of densely here, because I don't want this stuff to change too much. But now I'll put one down here, and then I can hover over the pin and I can drag this. So I can straighten my fish out, even make him curling a little bit back. And you can move these around constantly, so I could actually change you know, part of his fin direction. I can carefully adjust the body. The more pins you add, the more control you have over what you're doing. And if you accidentally add a pin and you want to get rid of it, I think you just backspace it. Yeah, and it gets rid of the pin. So now I've got this fish kind of going straight up and down. Maybe his tail's moving too much. And I'll just hit enter. I'll bring up the next fish. Hide this one. Control T to bring up the transform. Make sure you're on the right layer. Control T. And I'm just going to point his nose up. Hit enter and edit. Puppet warp on this one. So I'll put the pins again close up here because I don't want to change the top of the fish very much. And then I'll put one down at the tail so I can move everything pretty globally until it starts to kind of bend back on itself. Then I'll add another one to get a little bit more smoothness. Another one. And so the point of this is, with a few layers, you can make it look like a lot of layers with just a little bit of effort. When I've got him like I want, enter. The next fish, same thing. Now this fish, this other tool I use a lot is liquefy. So if puppet warp, I'll use a lot because if the object's thin like this, it's easy to tweak around. But I like puppet warp, especially for faces and doing things like that. And I make the size pretty big. So probably about 300 for the size on this one. Density and rate, I keep them pretty low because I like to not distort things too crazy quickly. And I can pin the edges, but I'm going to just leave it like this. And this one I'll just take and start pushing the fish around. That's not quite big enough. And you can make a sketch look like 100 different drawings really, really quick. Click OK. Now I'm going to puppet warp him a little bit just to straighten him out. I'm going to do a Control T first and put his nose straight up. And then image, edit, puppet warp. My 3 don't move a lot, pins, and my lower one to move his tail. Okay, so now I've got 3 fish that are generally looking straight up and down, which is what I wanted. I'll leave them ungrouped. In this group, what I'm going to do is, first thing is edit. The group selected. Transform, and I'm going to flip them horizontal. And I can get away with it in this group because there's no real complete directional light source. But now I've just used 3 fish, and I'm going to have here 6 or 9 pretty quick. So I'm going to Shift Control G, the group, to ungroup it. So now I've got the individual fish, starting with the top one, and I'm going to straighten him up. So Control T for just a regular transform. Put him up a little bit this way. Enter, and then I'll puppet warp him. Now I can't ever do it exactly the same because it just doesn't work that way for me, but I don't really care. I backspaced one, so I think I'll make him a little more just straight on. Enter, go down to the next one. Control T. This really works. This puppet warp thing really works good with tree branches. Anything that's got an alpha channel and is really kind of thin, making a different look for a lot of these kind of images. It's a quick way to do it without having to repaint a lot of stuff. And it doesn't really blur things too much, surprisingly. So here's the third one. Get rid of this. So I'm going to use this one, and then I'll go with the bottom ones. And I don't think I'll go through and straighten them all out. This will give you a good enough feeling for what I'm doing. Puppet warp. You have to pin down the areas you don't want to change with a little bit denser pins. I'm going to make him, if I can, kind of with that reverse snaky fish kind of thing. Point him a little more straight up and down. Okay, so enter. Now I've got 6 individual fish made from the original ones, and I'm just not going to use the original ones right now. I will, however, keep these extra copies because if I want to come back and change things, I want to have them available. So I select all these layers, and I am going to want to align them pretty close together. So layer, align, vertical centers, and layer, align, horizontal centers. And so now they're stacked one on top of the other pretty well with them all selected. Control G, and I'll name this group, so nozzle ready or something. Now what I usually do in Photoshop here too is turn off the background for a second, and this may clip, and it will. It's going to clip these layers, but I'll save it out, and I'll come back up and do image trim. And I want to get rid of all the transparent pixels so it will crop in as close as can be on the fish. And that did just what I wanted. Now, you can see the underneath, it's cut them off. So what I'll do is I'll save this, save as, and I will just call it koi nozzle. And then I will go back and do an undo a couple of times. And I'll go ahead and trim this just to get it to be a smaller image. But I won't be cutting out the background fish. Oh, trim. And then I'll just save this. So what I try to do as I'm building anything, brushes or anything, is I try to build resources that I can come back on and reopen and adjust and use again as much as I possibly can. So now move over into Painter. Close this. And I'll bring that file in. And so here it is, background and the nozzle ready, which is the group I'm going to be concerned with. Let me zoom in on it. So at this point, this whole thing up here is really pretty much ready to make a nozzle. So I'm going to go ahead and, with the nozzle library, let me open it so you know where to go. Window. media panels, nozzles, and from the little drop down menu, new nozzle from, or make nozzle from group. So there's my 6 fish put on a new nozzle. I don't know why the program artifacts strangely around sometimes, but it'll look okay in the nozzle. I probably should have made this little stumpy fish a little bit longer, but I'm not going to worry about it. So save this as koi fish nozzle, and I've got to save it in a RIF file, so it's RIF, and I'll save that. This is, I don't think I've shown you this feature of Painter yet, but it's one you need to know. I don't know how often you save, but I try to save at least every half hour, because I don't get too angry at myself if I lose a half hour's worth of work. But if I lose 2 or 3 or 4 hours worth of work, I get really angry because, you know, I'm stupid enough that I didn't save it. So the easiest, there's a really nice way to do it in Painter. And what I can do is you've got a called an iterative save. And I will do it right before I make any big changes, right after I make any big changes, or every 30 minutes at least. And what it is basically this. So I'm going to paint birds on top of my nozzle file here. And if I come up under File, and I just do it with the keyboards, I do iterative save, and if you can see it, I don't know how well you can see the name of the file up here, but if I do Control Alt S, it'll do an iterative save, and it adds a 001 up to here. So it'll automatically, every time I do it and save it, add a number up to the image name. And it'll do that whether it's a RIF or a PSD or whatever you work on. But if you'll do that, you always have a ready backup point that if you need to revert to for an accident or something, you can do it. Now I can undo this one, undo what I did here, and I could save it again up here. So Control Alt S, and it added a 002. It's not unusual for me to have 80 to 120 saved versions of any image that I work on. The advantage is then I can build little time lapses of a painting, but the big advantage is I don't lose work. And sometimes if I make a change that I think is going to be beautiful and it doesn't, and I want to go back 2 or 3 steps, it's really, really hard. So I'm going to go ahead and load this nozzle. And I can close this one, so let me close it. Well, let me load it. Usually I will do this onto my desktop so that I know where to find it, but I'm just putting it on a disk right now. I'm going to close this. Close this. So we're going to work on, now I'll show you how to change this brush. And if you can work along with me, you'll understand what I'm doing a little bit better. So 2000 by 2000 pixels. I've got the image hose. Let me revert it to default just in case I've made changes. So in here you can restore the default variant of any brush, or you can restore all the defaults in all of the different categories. Be careful if you use this one, because if you have any brush that you've made that you really like, it'll restore it back to whatever brush you made it from. But I'm going to restore this one just so I can make sure that it's it's a good starting place. Oh, and maybe this one already works. Nope. Okay, so he's not following me, but this is a good one. So linear pressure. So he'll start really small and get bigger as I press down. And just backspace to clear the layer. So I will bring up the, and it disappeared. Where'd my proper brush properties go? Brush control panels. I'll just start opening the general one. And what I'm looking to have is spacing, which is right here. And I don't see size or pressure, but I've got spacing, stroke jitter, and smoothing. I want those. So let me come back and open another one. Brush control panels. It says some are open somewhere. I don't see them. Stroke preview, dab preview. Oh, brush shape. I want size. And I'll come up and dock this. Just the size panel. I'll drag it up. And I usually put it up kind of toward the top just by holding on it and dragging the panel around if it'll not disappear on me. So if you hold on the little tab, you can drag it over and you can see it turns into a little blue line. And so I want to usually put that up toward the top. So I've got size. A lot of times I'll drag spacing up into this and a little vertical, and I can lock them next to each other. When I close this, if the program crashes, it won't save it. But when I close this, next time when I open General Brush Controls, it'll include everything that I'm docking into it. So a couple more things I want to probably do. Brush shape, spacing, size. I've pretty much got, I think, what I'm going to need on this one. So I'll start with this. So usually in a brush like this, the first thing I want to do is make sure I can paint with it. And figure out what I'm doing wrong. What am I doing? Oh, I moved something. I don't want eraser. These aren't even, let me switch brushes again. I reset something by accident, it appears. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing I want to do on this one is I want to increase the size between the brush, between the fish. So I'll come up to spacing and the slider here, and I'm going to increase it maybe up to 200%, and then see what they're spaced like. That looks a lot better. But I'm still got the little tiny fish. I might want to set the minimum spacing high so I don't get any little overlapping fish, or I might want to go ahead and leave it low and know that I might stack some on top of each other. And then I want to change the size that generally they use. Most of the time, I don't want the minimum size on something like this or flowers or something. I don't want it to be too dramatically different because the fish wouldn't be probably dramatically different sized. So I'll raise this up around 80% or higher. So now I get fish based on pressure. The smallest they can be is 80% of what the bigger size fish are. I can have size jitter so that they actually jitter from size. I'll lower this so you can see it. So now the size of the fish is jittering between the minimum size, 57% of this. And that's actually not too bad. So size, what I want it to do though, the expression of it or what drives this stroke, usually it's pressure, so the harder you press, the larger they get, or vice versa. In a nozzle like this, I will change it to random, and that will give me random size brush or random size fish put out with each stroke. The other thing I would want to do with this brush is, you know, they're painting pretty good, but they're pretty much in a line. And I don't want that, I don't want them to be painting in a line, so I'm going to add a little bit of jitter. So there's this stroke jitter down here. I'll really crank it up so you can see it, and then I'll back it down. So see, now they're painting all over the place. That's a little bit too much out of control for what I want to do. So I'll get rid of that, and I'll lower the jitter just to maybe 0.4 or something. Now they'll paint with a little bit of jitter so they're not quite all in the line all the time. Now I want these guys to follow my brush stroke, so I'm going to move the spacing down a little bit so they're a little more tightly packed. And that'll work. But see, they still don't. They're always, with this, they're always swimming upstream, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I want them to follow my stroke I'm making. So I need one more that didn't open. Window, brush control panels, brush shape, angle. So here's the angle panel, and I will, not right now, but I will take it and dock it by spacing, because I use this quite a bit. Right now, the most important thing for you to remember is if you want to change the direction these fish paint in, you need to set the squeeze at something less than 100%, and it can be 99. It doesn't have to be much. But what squeeze does is it'll start making the objects thinner and thinner and thinner, the stroke thinner and thinner and thinner, the individual pieces thinner. So if I squeeze it down really a lot, well, it's making them thinner up to bottom, but not side to side. So if I had them oriented side to side, they'd be really thin little fish. But I'm not gonna have them. I'll just have them at 98%. And what do I want to drive the direction they're pointing in? And this one I will change it to direction here, which is the direction my cursor's moving. This isn't going to be quite right yet, but you can see that as I'm drawing my cursor a different direction, the fish now are aligned toward the fish food in the center. That's working pretty well. But what I want to do is, my angle range is 360, the angle step is 4. That's not too bad. The angle, I think, is going to be okay. So I've just increased the smoothness of angle jitter, but now I've done the wrong thing and they're not following me. So I'm going to change the angle of the brush, and it will probably be 90 degrees or 180. So now my fish are going backwards, so I'll change my angle to 180. Whoops. That didn't work. Let's try 270. And now my fish are following me. So if you make, for example, and I'll increase the spacing a little bit, if you made footprints or bugs or anything, piano keys, anything that you wanted to follow your stroke. The funny thing is, if I go backwards this way, they flip immediately, and I can decide how much I want them to change. So if the angle, they'll go the whole 360. But if I change this to 90 degrees, they'll snap now to 90-degree shifts. So they're still following me, but the angle jump is 0 to 90 to 270 to 180. I usually have it down really low if I really want them to follow me. So 5% or less, depending on how complex the brush, because you can get it so small that it takes the brush time to load and print them out. So they're a little too close together, and you know, invariably I get one on the tail end that's the wrong way as I'm touching the brush down. They're not too hard to get out of. So I'm going to increase the spacing again. It seems like whenever I touch it, I cannot get it starting where it doesn't stamp one down the opposite direction. And I'll just cut that one out. So there's a little more spacing between them. I'm going to increase it some more, minimum spacings all the way up. And a little more jitter. So now they just follow, and you can paint schools of fish underneath, and like you know, you can paint them with the background color. So the more background color, the deeper the fish become. And there's some jitter in there. I want 0. And of course it will work with them really small. So if you get this brush that you like, you've got it working with your fish. Maybe the spacing's a little too big. I kind of like them overlapping a little bit. If I want individual ones, I'll stamp them with a slight kick in direction so that I can still get my stylus following, or I'll stamp them with my mouse. When I like this, then the brush, then I'm going to come up under the brush, and first thing I'll do is create a new brush category, and I'll put my name on it. And now I will come up and in brushes, I'm going to save this variant. So it's taking linear pressure, it's asking me where I want to save it, and it's already picked the Dawn new brush category. And if I specifically want to know a little bit more about how it's maybe going to behave, I will name it, you know, follow the leader koi or something like that. Koi following, and save it. Now the thing I've got to do is go back, and usually it'll, there it is, it picks up, you know, the image is some of the preview for it, but I need to come back to the image hose brushes, and this one's still picked, but it's still painting koi. So I want to come up under here and brushes, restore the default variant, so it'll go back to the original way that brush paints. I know this is deep. That's okay. Just hang in there with it. We're going to go over this periodically a lot so you get a better handle on it. Okay, I'm going to go back and pick my brush that I just created, koi following, and I'm going to reload the koi PSD file. So it's probably this one. Yeah, because I added fish on the finished nozzle. So I've got all of these guys, again, the 9 ones, up in this group ready to make into a nozzle. I'm going to go up into effects though, and maybe it's objects. And this time I'm going to create a drop shadow on each one of these layers. And you can set the different parameters, all of this kind of stuff. I'm going to collapse them to one layer so that each fish will have his individual drop shadow layer off to the side of him. You can make this really obvious, but I'm going to leave it pretty average, and then click OK. And I need to make sure that it was supposed to line them up underneath. Let me try it again. That may be a new feature. Oh, I got rid of the whole thing. Delete those layers. Okay, let me see what it does. Let me ungroup. Or they are. Let me ungroup them, because I want to get rid of those empty layers. Ungroup, select these. So I'm just control clicking the layer and delete them. So now what happened? I only got 2 fish. Okay, let me back up. Okay, this is pre-add the drop shadow, so let's try it now. Effects, create drop shadow. Live demo effects. I'm a little befuddled on what it's actually doing here. So this layer actually is correct. It creates a drop shadow off that. But this layer, that layer is correct. That layer is correct. But it's wiped out my fish on this one. I don't think that's user error. I think that's a bug. Let me try it with each one. Let me close this and reopen it. Reset. That's the wrong one. Well, I guess let me try it layer by layer, and then if that works, then I'll write and complain and figure out why they are not doing it the right way. So I'm just going to turn off these layers. I'm glad I don't have 90 images. Real quick, select this one, effects, object, create drop shadow. So that's correct. And I am collapsing it to one layer. That's correct. That's correct. This is why too, making sure you get rid of any little white edges is important. Also in the effects menu, you don't always have to go down to objects. The last effect you used is always at the top, like in Photoshop, except it doesn't automatically apply it. It just opens the dialog so you can make any changes you want. Now, why did it do that? Okay, that worked. And this last one. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure they're all visible again, and I don't know why. I'll figure it out, because you should be able to do it to every object in a group. Collapse this. This is now a group of the fish, and I'm going to make a nozzle from the group. So here's all the fish, and the drop shadows are there. They don't look like it. And then I'll name this one. So koi fish shadow nozzle, and I can close it. Close this. And I'm going to change, it's already my brush, so I'm going to load that nozzle. And now when I paint with it, let me get rid of the color. As they overlap, you can see the shadow. It's just a little drop shadow on each one of them, and it will help just a little bit create a little more 3D look, especially in leaves and things like this, where these koi are really patterned. You know, it's almost like they're camouflaged to see any little drop shadow stuff. So that's creating the brush. Now to export these into a library or put them into library, I selected the library I picked last time I made in class, or if you need to make a new one, it's this box down here, new nozzle library. Name it whatever, your name's best. I'm just going to cancel. But then I'm going to, since this nozzle's already loaded, I'm going to add this nozzle to the library. So, Control D. Whoops, I picked the wrong one. I need to load it again, because tapping on the butterfly loaded that one. And I will add this to the library. Koi fish shadow, and I usually just take off the nozzle rift because I don't need the extension on it. So there's that one, and I'm going to load the other one without the shadow. Koi fish nozzle, open, and add this one to the library. So now I got 4 in there. You got to have 6. When you get them all in there, it's going to be clicking on Export Nozzle Library. So the third one over. It'll ask you which library. It'll show them all. It'll ask you which library. Click on it, OK. And wherever you want to save it, I'm just going to save it where I've been saving all this stuff at the bottom. So Dawn Nozzle Library save. And then at the bottom of where I saved it, here it is, Dawn Nozzle Library, 1.9, almost 2 megabytes. So this is what your nozzle library, that's what I want you to upload for the assignment.